Hey guys, welcome to Dogforge. My name's Paul and this is our Tasha's Cauldron of Everything series. Do you want more D&D and Tasha's content? Then hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. Every subscriber helps to build and support our channel and we are extremely grateful for each and every one of you. But now it's time to grab your chisel and stretch those surprisingly long limbs. Today we're taking a look at the Rune Knight Fighter. Now this is a fighter that I was looking forward to just because the very nature of it offers a lot of customizability and options for the fighter without just revolving around spells or hey, you can cast this spell but not really as a spell. I like seeing a lot more unique mechanics, especially at this point in 5e's life cycle, and I feel that this does deliver. Although personally I have some distaste with it, I still think it's a strong and useful subclass. So one thing to understand right off the bat that you may not understand if you're not familiar with 5e's, well, D&D in general's lore, is that runes are heavily connected to the giant race, and as such they have made the decision to heavily tie giants in with this subclass. So if you didn't find my surprisingly long limb joke funny at the beginning, maybe give me a delayed laugh. You know, a little bit of validation never goes wrong. But that's one of my personal distastes with this. I would prefer to see a detachment from that giant flavour, especially as, particularly in this book, they are pushing towards more setting agnostic things, and giants using runes most certainly is not setting agnostic. But getting into what we actually get, starting at 3rd level where we get our fighter subclass, you're going to get additional proficiency with smith's tools, and you learn to speak, read and write giant. I don't know why they bother going into that much detail, as I don't think I've ever seen an ability that gives you the ability to just read, or just read and write and not speak. Anywho, moving on to Rune Carver. Now this is the bulk, and you can think of this somewhat similar to an Artificer's Infusions. If you're familiar with the Artificer class, that might help you get familiar or wrap your head around this ability. So you can use magic runes to enhance your gear. You learn, when you gain this feature at 3rd level, 2 runes of your choice from among the runes described below, and each time you gain a level in this class you can replace one rune you know with a different one from this feature. When you reach certain levels in this class, you learn additional runes as shown in the runes known table. So when you level up, you can swap out one of the runes as if you were swapping out a spell as a caster. So you're going to start off with 2 at 3rd, at 7th level you're going to get a 3rd rune, at 10th level you'll get a 4th rune, and you'll peak at 15th level with 5 runes. Now whenever you finish a long rest you can touch a number of objects equal to the number of runes you know, and you can inscribe a different rune onto each of the objects. So if you know 2 different runes, you can put each rune onto one object. There is no doubling up on the runes. To be eligible, an object must be a weapon, suit of armour, shield, a piece of jewellery, or something else you can wear or hold in a hand. Your rune remains on the object until you finish a long rest, and an object can bear only one of your runes at a time. So this encompasses most objects, but I feel this is probably trying to avoid some degree of abuse more than it is trying to stick with a thematic element, because it does still leave it quite wide. So you can't shove this, say, on a quill and then have that quill in your quill case, in your backpack, out of view, out of harm's way, and still make use of the thing. It's going to have to be something that you're wearing or holding actively. And just while we're here, we do have an image of a full orc rune knight. So we can see heavily scarred, and we've got some runes on the chest plate and on the axe. So I would have liked more, perhaps more of a departure here. I don't believe that they do this at all, but if you're familiar with the Rising from the Lost War book, there is a full page spread of the dragon marks, where you can see what each dragon mark actually looks like. And I would have liked if they had at least done something like that, or just put a small picture, like a thumbnail size, kind of next to each rune so that you get some idea as a starting flavor. Just to help some players, because not everyone is inclined to immediately picture these things, and for a book that is so heavily providing flavor boxes, which we've seen in a lot of the subclasses we've covered thus far, I would have just liked to have seen that. But if you're looking at the subclass and you are stretched for ideas, then you can just look at other mythology. You can use, say, a more classic rune that you would get from some Viking lore for fire, or if you want to go in a slightly different route, you can go for the Japanese character for fire, like you might see in the Konoha village in Naruto. So there is a lot of different ways you can flavour your runes, and I just think they should have covered that really. Getting into the runes themselves. So the following runes are available to you. If a rune has a level requirement, you must be at least that level in this class to learn that rune. If a rune requires a saving throw, the DC is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your constitution modifier, which is not quite as nice as focusing on strength or dex for a fighter, but it does add some incentive to double down on your constitution, which, seeing as they're going for giant flavor, does seem to fit and is always great for any martial or any character at all really. Side note, if you are going for this kind of character and Rising from the Last War content is on the table for you as you are using Constitution, then you may benefit from taking the Aberrant Dragon Mark feat. So starting off with our runes, we have the Cloud rune. This rune emulates the deceptive magic used by some cloud giants. While wearing or carrying an object inscribed with this rune, you have advantage on Dexterity Sleight of Hand checks and Charisma Deception checks. And this is the first highlight of basically how these runes work. Each rune is going to get a passive always on ability, and then a more powerful active ability that you can use a limited number of times. In addition, when you or a creature you can see within 30 feet of you is hit by an attack roll, you can use your reaction to invoke the rune and choose a different creature within 30 feet of you other than the attacker. The chosen creature becomes the target of the attack using the same roll. This magic can transfer the attack's effects regardless of the attack's range. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. So basically, if one of your party members is getting smacked in the face by an axe, and 20 feet away another miscellaneous enemy NPC is about to attack another one of your party members, you can transfer that axe damage from your party member over to your the assailant of your other party member, as long as the attack would still hit. So if the attack against your party member would not hit any of the enemy creatures, then the effect basically becomes wasted. The attack still happens, but it doesn't hit anyone. That still has value, you're still negating the attack, but you're not getting that damage. So that is something that you should bear in mind. You are not transferring the effects of the attack per se, you are transferring the attack itself. So next up is the Fire rune. This rune's magic channels the masterful craftsmanship of the great smiths. And this is one thing that I'm talking about, like, even in the passive things, it draws heavily on the archetypes of the different types of giants in D&D, and that could make it a little difficult to transpose the flavour of this into a different setting or just a specific character idea you have. While wearing or carrying an object inscribed with this rune, your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses your proficiency with a tool. Tool expertise, basically. In addition, when you hit a creature with an attack using a weapon, you can invoke the rune to summon fiery shackles. The target takes an extra 2d6 fire damage, and it must succeed on a strength saving throw or be restrained for 1 minute. While restrained by the shackles, the target takes an additional 2d6 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, banishing the shackles on a success. Once again, you can do this once per short or long rest. This is a pretty great ability, so this triggers like a smite. You're not going to waste this ability ever, because it always triggers on a hit, and you get that 2d6 up front. and then it can, if they fail the saving throw, impose the restrain condition. So this looks really good on the surface. However, I do have to point out that fire is one of the right up there with poison, one of the more resisted and immune damage types, and raw, the elemental adept feat, would not apply to this. If you are choosing to take the fire rune, you may want to discuss with your DM about the elemental adept feat applying to your fire damage. Otherwise, don't expect this damage to be universally 2d6 against anybody. And it's also targeting strength, which is... It's not always a strong stat for monsters by any stretch of the imagination, but there are a lot of strong or meaty monsters or monsters with above average strength, so it's not the greatest thing to target, especially since your saving throw is keying off of your constitution, not your primary stat. A good rune, but I think it's easy to think this rune is better than it is at first look if you don't understand the weaknesses inherent to how it's built. Next up is the Frost rune, and so the passive ability for this is that you have advantage on Wisdom Animal Handling checks and Charisma Intimidation checks. In addition, you can invoke the rune as a bonus action to increase your sturdiness. For 10 minutes you gain a +2 to all ability checks and saving throws that use Strength or Constitution. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. This is niche. So if you are fighting something that you know is going to be proccing a lot of strength or constitution saving throws, then that can be great. If you are putting yourself in more of a grappling kind of role, or you want to shove and then grapple, then that advantage could be great. But outside of very particular builds or giving this rune, because again, you don't have to so outside of very specific builds, I don't see this being particularly useful. Maybe once you've got 3 or 4 runes total, you could work it in, but I don't see this being a first pick for most people. Moving on to the Stone rune, the passive for this is going to be you get advantage on insight checks, and you have dark vision out to a range of 120 feet. So already we have a very strong passive, you get superior dark vision, and insight checks, that's a pretty good check to get advantage on. So this could be great on, say, your variant humans if you're going for that feat, or if you're going for, say, a Goliath, which is, in my estimation, an underappreciated race. Then this could patch their dark vision weakness. And then the active ability, when a creature you can see ends its turn within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to invoke the rune and force that creature to make a wisdom saving throw. Unless the save succeeds, the creature is charmed by you for 1 minute, and whilst it is charmed in this way, the creature has a speed of 0 and is incapacitated, descending into a dreamy stupor. The creature repeats the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success, and you can do this once per short or long rest. This is really great because it gives the fighter another kind of control option, and this does not say that this does not explicitly say that something like damage or particular actions of your companions breaks that. So you could even, it lasts for a minute. You can use this to bypass an entire single creature encounter if you'd like, or to get, if you're going for more of a out of strictly combat use. If you're trying to get past a guard at some point, just throw the rune on a guard, slip through the door, and when he comes back out of it a minute later, you're gone, and there's been no violence necessary. So this is a pretty good rune, especially with those strong passives. Personally, I'm more inclined to pick this up because of those strong passives, but I can definitely see the value of the active effect too. Now we are moving into our level restricted runes. I find it somewhat amusing that the first of the level restricted runes is also the bottom of the ordning. First up we have Hill, and you are going to need to be 7th level or higher in the fighter class to get this. So whilst wearing or carrying an object, blah blah blah, your passive ability is that you get advantage on saving throws against being poisoned, and you have a resistance against poison damage. That's pretty good. Poison damage is pretty prolific in general. Just ask my players, purple worms suck. And then the active ability, you can invoke the rune as a bonus action, gaining resistance to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage for 1 minute. And you can do that again once per short or long rest. So it's basically like getting on your fighter Rage Light. You're not going to get any of the other effects of Rage, but you're going to get that resistance to BPS. That's quite nice. If you're going for more of a tanky character, I can see this being of particular value to you. So, pretty strong. Not really seeing why it's a hill rune, but whatever. Then the next one, and final, and just to clarify, the highest level you will need to be for any of these is 7th level. Once you hit 7th level, the entire list of runes is available to you. So the final rune, Storm Rune, 7th level or higher in fighter class. Your passive for this is going to be advantage on intelligence arcana checks, and you can't be surprised as long as you aren't incapacitated. So you're getting a sliver of the alert feat there. Something to bear in mind, if you are taking or plan to take the alert feat for the initiative bump at the very least, then this rune becomes a lot less appealing to you. And then the active ability, as a bonus action you can enter a prophetic state for 1 minute or until you are incapacitated. Until the state ends, when you or another creature you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, a saving throw or ability check, you can use your reaction to cause the roll to have advantage or disadvantage. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. So basically, this is really strong. I can certainly see why this is level gated. So basically, for 1 combat arrest with a bonus action activation, you can force somebody to have advantage or disadvantage. So this is a great buff or debuff ability, and this really packages into the kind of controlling aspect that you can build out with the Rune Knight. Honestly, this is probably one of my favourite runes overall. It's a really great ability, and it's something that I think adds a lot of flexibility to the fighters in the way that some of the subclasses don't. But we are not done at 3rd level. No, you guys are already a stupid amount of time in, and we have Giant's Might, our 3rd level feature. So this is, again, another heavy tie into all of that giant stuff. So as a bonus action, you can enter a giant state, essentially, which lasts for 1 minute. If you are smaller than large, you become large along with everything you are carrying. If you lack the room to become large, your size doesn't change. Something important to state here is that it is not a straight size increase. So if you are playing a small creature, like a halfling, gnome, kobold, goblin, etc., then you are skipping medium and going straight to large. And if you don't have the room to grow in size, you are not denied the entire ability, you just don't grow. You still get the next 2 bullet points, which are, you have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. Once on each of your turns, one of your hits with a weapon or unarmed strike can deal an extra 1d6 damage to a target. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, because this is a Tasha's subclass, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. I cannot tell you my distaste for the fact that this is a giant thing, but an extra 1d6 is pretty par for the course with what they consider a valuable but balanced damage increase. We see this kind of damage bump a lot, particularly in Tasha's. The one that jumps to mind straight away is the Swarm Keeper Ranger. They also can freely add 1d6 per turn. This is a little bit of a departure in my view from something like the PHB, where you could potentially see like a 1d8 from a hunter, although it must be noted that the hunter's ability is more limited in some ways, but it's also more free in others. Moving on to 7th level and Runic Shield. You learn to invoke your runic magic to protect your allies. When another creature you can see within 60 feet of you is hit by an attack roll, you can use your reaction to force the attacker to re-roll, and they must use the new roll. You can use this feature a number of times equal to proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So a defensive ability. Now, it states that you protect your allies, and it doesn't explicitly say, like some of the other abilities in this book do, that you can be included in this, but in all other language that we have in 5e, a creature you can see does include you. So you can use this ability to defend yourself as well as your party members. This is great in that it can instantly negate a crit. Do not mistake this as being a absolute defense, because if they reroll, they can just roll the same, higher, or even a crit. So this is not disadvantage. This is not quite as good as disadvantage. But it's still a very strong feature, and it is a departure from the PHB and others, where we would get mostly a role player out of combat ability. Now we're just getting a straight combat ability, and it is fairly powerful. Level 10, we're going to Great Stature. And first of all, we get a ribbon ability. When you gain this feature, you grow a number of inches equal to 3d4. Because, I guess, you could be the tallest halfling in the village. Or, I guess maybe you had an encounter with a treant. Moreover, the extra damage you deal with your Giant Smite feature increases to 1d8. This is underwhelming to say the least. Your entire 10th level feature basically amounts to, hey, you got a growth spurt and an extra 1 damage on average. The rest of the subclass is pretty strong, but I would prefer a more even distribution than something like that. That's pretty pointless in my view. Master of Runes at 15th level though, and you can invoke each rune you know from your Rune Carver feature twice rather than once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. So this is a pretty big buff. You can now start burning your active rune abilities twice per short rest instead of just once. And this is pretty fitting. This is on par with other subclasses that are getting, at will boosts. I know the fighter for the samurai gets their, initiative recharge earlier than this, but I think this is about on par with what the Battlemaster gets off the top of my head. So this is a really powerful buff to your overall features, but it's not adding anything new. And we finish off at level 18 with Runic Juggernaut. You learn how to amplify your runic powered transformation, and as a result, the extra damage you deal with giant smiting creatures to a lofty 1d10. Moreover, when you use that feature, your size can increase to huge, and while you are that size, your reach increases by 5 feet. This is, oh boy, is that an underwhelming capstone. So you get another meager to say the least damage bump to keep your damage up to par. You can't see the air quotes I just did, but hopefully that comes across. Moreover, when you use this feature, you can increase to huge. I mean, practically this is just moving you out of the range of grappling for some creatures and moving you into the range of grappling other creatures. And your reach increases by 5 feet. Neat. I mean, your 18th level, this just overall seems underwhelming. I feel like this is a particularly front-loaded subclass. In some ways, even more so than Battlemaster is. I mean, at least with Battlemaster, you're getting more dice, bigger dice, a recharge. I kind of feel like this is a heavily front-loaded class, and I can definitely see jumping out very quickly. At the very least, I can see 7 being a good break point for any multi-classes, because you're going to hit that threshold to gain access to all of the runes, and you're going to get that runic shield ability. Now, Master of Runes is nice, everything else is kind of there, so personally I would take it to 7 or maybe 8 for the ASI, and then jump ship to something more interesting. But that is what I think about the Rune Knight. Again, I'm not a fan of the giant flavor. I'm not a fan of some of the later abilities. I think design-wise they went a little bit too hard and heavy initially. I think maybe a couple more rune options that were available at even higher levels, say tier 3, would have been appropriate and been more compelling as a reason to stay in this subclass. And one thing that I feel personally is missing is a very basic rune that does absolutely nothing but add like a d4 to your weapon damage. I mean, the only clear-cut, hey, here's some more weapon damage for you rune in here is the fire rune, and you know, fiery shackles. I don't want that. I just, maybe this is my personal bias with how runic magic is in my head, but I would just like to slam a rune on my sword that does like an extra d4 frost damage when I hit people. And then when I hit certain levels, that die grows to apply some scaling. I think that there was definitely scope for something like that in here, and I think that would have catered to a much more streamlined, simplified take on this Rune Knight, rather than having all of these active abilities that you have to juggle. But that is just my waffly opinion. What do you guys think about the Rune Knight? Let us know in the comments down below, and whilst you're down there, hit that like button if you like this video. If you got this far, well done to you. You can have an unofficial pat on the back from me and an official thumbs up. If you want more Tasha's and 5e content, then hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And if you want your next fix straight away, then smash one of those boxes appearing on screen now. I'll understand if you needed to take a breather to get some caffeine. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time at the Forge.